Back in March of 2021, I made a video talking about coasters where my opinion may have been wrong. These are coasters I hadn't ridden in a few years, or I only got to ride once, or I feel like I got a bad ride on. Well, over the last 3 years, I've gone around the country and I've gotten most of the re-rides I needed. Today, let's run down that list, talk about why I was there in the first place, and if those re-rides changed my opinion. These are the coasters I need to re-ride, 3 years later. As always, I had some honorable mentions. One of them was Goliath at Six Flags Great America. At the time, I hadn't ridden it since 2017. 4 years had passed. I had ridden a ton of new RMCs since then, and I wasn't sure what I was going to think of it when I got back on it. I got some more rides a few months after that video, and it solidified itself as a strong RMC, albeit short. It's one of the best paced RMCs, but it just lacks the number of elements. Still, somehow, I never come off disappointed. Then, there was Gold Striker at California's Great America. It had almost been 3 years at that point, and I got on this just a couple months later. After 4 rides in 2018, I had this ranked number 1 in the park, ahead of Railblazer. I only got 1 ride in 2021 and it was as rough as I'd ever seen it, but in the end, still my top ranked coaster in the park. Impulse at Knoebels was a coaster I only rode once back in 2018. That was in the rain, eyes closed most of the time because of the pain, and it was closed for me in 2020. I did get back to Knoebels when it was open in 2021, but as usual, it had a huge line. This was the 4th park that day, hitting Idlewild, Lakemont, Del Grosso's, and finally Knoebels at the end, so we just didn't have a lot of time. Plus, it just didn't seem worth the wait when Phoenix was a walk-on. I still have only ridden this once. The Incredible Hulk at Islands of Adventure is a coaster I hadn't ridden since 2012. I wasn't a super big enthusiast back then. I remember it being fun, but I didn't psychoanalyze it, so I wanted to ride it with a critical eye. I was able to do that in June 2021, and it blew away all my expectations. This was so relentless, so intense, great pacing, unique layout. I was happy. Last one, Flight Deck at Canada's Wonderland. This has an awful reputation. I knew that when I rode it in 2018, but we had the chance to ride it in the front row and I took it. It wasn't that bad, but I wanted to ride it in the back to see if it was as bad as advertised. I was able to do this in the summer of 2023, and sure enough, it was a train wreck like everyone said. Well done everyone, you were right. Before we get started with the official list, if you can drop this video a like, I'd appreciate it. It helps with the YouTube algorithm. And if you're new here and love coasters, please give me a sub. A couple channel plugs. Airtime Thrills Raw Footage. If you have your own channel and need footage, check this out. There's almost 400 coasters on here. Also, Home Run Productions. If you love baseball like me, check this out. Number 15, New Mexico Rattler at Cliffs Amusement Park. I lapped this the first time I went to Cliffs in 2017. I got 6 rides. I thought it was a lot of fun. But then, I added around 400 more coasters since then. I wasn't sure if this was going to hold up after riding so many other great wooden coasters. I got back here in the summer of 2022. I got 1 ride on the Rattler, and it was just insanely rough. There's no way it ran like that in 2017. I wouldn't have ridden it 6 times if it was. I thought the layout was good. It was a quality ride. Easily something I would have re-ridden had it had round wheels, but I think those were square, triangle at best. So if Cliffs can fix that, they'll have an awesome re-rideable wooden coaster on their hands. Number 14, Mighty Canadian Mindbuster at Canada's Wonderland. I rode this one time in 2018. It was one of the last coasters I rode that day, and I had it with this park. I tried to get all the credits in one day. That's a tall task for a park that's very top heavy. And by the time I got beat up by Mindbuster, I said it was one of the worst coasters I'd ever ridden. Some people didn't agree. I said I needed to give this a fair shake, and in 2023 I did. It starts off okay, decent airtime, then the forces disappear. Then, after the turnaround, the roughness kicks in. I heard this got track work since I last rode it in 2018, but I guess that wore off between then and 2023. It's definitely a coaster whose time has come. Number 13, White Lightning at Fun Spot Orlando. I wasn't really a big fan of this back in 2018, but apparently I wrote it wrong. You can't pop in and ride it in the morning with an empty train. You gotta wait till night when the park comes alive. All those people leaving Disney, Universal, and SeaWorld, and that's when this is running at its best. I didn't exactly do that in 2021, but I did go later in the afternoon and I saw a big difference. White Lightning shot up my list after those rides, and probably would be even higher had I waited till night. Number 12. Twister at Knoebels. The first 2 times I rode Twister in 2018 and 2020, the weather was awful. The first time, I was actually being pelted by rain. The second time, it was just cloudy and the park was empty. I said I needed to ride this on a hot and crowded day, and in 2021, that's just what I did. The same day I came back and decided not to ride Impulse, I did get to ride Twister. They had strict assigned seating and I didn't get to ride it in the back, but still, my opinion didn't change. It's a long, complex layout, but for me, it's just forceless, so I can't put this any higher on my list. Number 11. American Thunder at Six Flags St. Louis. The first time I rode this in 2018, it was my 9th and final credit of the day. The other coasters, aside from Mr. Freeze, weren't all that great, so when I got to this GCI, it really impressed me. I got a couple rides and I put this in my top 50. A lot of people do not like this coaster, and I thought maybe I overrated it. I finally got back on 5 years later, summer of 2023, and my opinion did drop, but not by much. It's not that rough, it has decent airtime, it's a long ride, it has a good layout. It's not top 50 worthy, but I wasn't disappointed. It's a very solid mid-tier GCI. Number 10. Lost Coaster of Superstition Mountain at Indiana Beach. At the time, I had only ridden this once, that being in the front car facing backwards. It was really interesting and wild, but there are so many other ways to ride this. Back car, facing forward, different visuals and different forces. I did get back for one more ride in 2021, this time facing forward, and it was nice to get a different experience, but my opinion didn't change. That's not a bad thing. For a coaster this slow and this short, it delivers all it can, and it's still the weirdest coaster I've ever ridden. Number 9. Copperhead Strike at Carowinds. When I made this video, I had only ridden it right after it opened. It was cold and raining and I didn't get the best rides. Since then, I've been back twice. Both days were crazy hot. I rode both times later in the day, but I still had a split opinion. In 2021, I said, yes, this is the ride I was expecting. It was running hot, forceful, powerful. And then I come back in 2022 and it was a letdown once again. I'm not sure what to think. I guess I'll have to ride it again and see if it keeps ping-ponging back and forth. Number 8. Prowler at Worlds of Fun. I mainly put this on my list so I could go back and get some night rides. I rode this 4 times in 2018. The morning rides were not good. The afternoon rides were very good. This is set out in the woods where a night ride would be really awesome. But even though I've been back to the park each of the last 3 years, I never found the time to ride this at night. We either have to set aside 4 hours to drive home or 4 hours to drive to the next park. So, one day I'll get that night ride, but my rides in the last 3 years have been pretty good. I found the front gives a very smooth ride, the back not so much, and I still maintain it's a poor man's Mystic Timbers. Number 7. Viper at Six Flags Great America. When I rode this facing forward in 2016, it became one of my favorite wooden coasters. I rode it backwards in 2017 and it was still good, but I missed it going forward. In 2021 and 2023, I got some more rides on this, both forward, and at first I had to drop it. It was nowhere near as forceful or smooth as it was back then, but in 2023 I got a couple of outstanding rides, and I learned more about this coaster. The back row versus second to back is a world of difference. Second to back is amazing, very back will hurt your spine. Also, we tried row 3 in the front, and that had an awful pothole. I heard the park might be fixing that this off-season. I hope it's true. In the end, Viper in the right seat is a top-tier wooden coaster. Number 6. Screamin' Eagle at Six Flags St. Louis. My first trip to the park in 2018, it was just okay. I rode it in the morning, it wasn't too rough. It wasn't very forceful. It had some good track length, but I thought it was just kind of whatever. Then I hear everyone saying how great it is, and it makes me wonder if I got it wrong. Maybe I should have given it another chance. 5 years later, I did. I rode this once in July, once in September, and one thing did change a lot. It's insanely rough. My first ride was worse than my second. Maybe I was just prepared for it more, but it was even rougher than the boss, and that's saying a lot. I was bouncing around so much, I couldn't tell what was roughness and what was airtime. The ride itself seemed good underneath all of that, so if they could just fix the jackhammering, this would be a really good ride. Number 5. Boulder Dash at Lake Compounce. It was a miracle I got to ride this in 2018. They opened it 2 hours before the park closed. I got 3 rides, but because it was down all day, it felt like I was getting morning rides. It was running cold, it was also rough. It didn't have a lot of force, so in the end, I was kinda disappointed with this bucket list coaster. Its location was the only thing saving it. To this day, I still haven't gotten back to Lake Compounce to give it another try. I went up to New England once in 2021, but I didn't have a Palace Pass, and I didn't want to pay full admission to pop in for one ride. We went to Quasi instead. If I do a trip to the Northeast and I hit all the small parks up there, I'll get back to Lake Compounce. Number 4. Predator at Six Flags Darien Lake. My ride in 2018 was so bad, this shot down to be my lowest ranked wooden coaster. Still, I thought it could be a good ride if it had round wheels, and I was encouraged when I heard GCI was coming in to put some Titan track on it. In 2023, I came back, got to ride it with all that new steel track, and it was definitely smoother. I even let Sophie ride it after giving it a test run, but I was wrong about one thing. Once it smoothed out, it was not a good ride. This was pretty forceless. I would even call it boring. I thought the ride had potential, but it didn't, so I'm fully on board for the RMC treatment at some point. Number 3. Lightning Rod at Dollywood. When I made this video, I had gotten my amazing opening year rides in 2016, and then my neutered rides in 2019. Not only was it slower, it was also getting rough. When I made this video in 2021, it was getting new steel iBox track, and I thought that could really improve the coaster. The roughness made it really hard not to get stapled, and I also thought it could better support the faster speed it used to run with back in 2016. When I got back here in 2022, it was definitely smoother. The iBox track did wonders for that, but it wasn't any faster. Still a top tier ride, but didn't launch this back into my top 5 where it used to be. Number 2. Boardwalk Bullet at Keyma Boardwalk. I rode this one time in 2017, shortly after it opened in the morning, and it wasn't anything special. People rave about this, and I figured I may have done it all wrong. Ride it when it's warmed up, ride it with a full train, maybe give it more than one shot. I almost got back to Houston in 2022, but it didn't work out, so I'm trying to see if I can do it this year. I really want to see if I just got a bad ride, or since it was back in 2017, I wasn't looking at it from a true enthusiast standpoint. I don't know, but I need to get back on it, and unfortunately, as of February 2024, I haven't. Number 1. Hollywood Rip Ride Rocket at Universal Studios Florida. I rode this a bunch of times when I was on my honeymoon back in 2012. I didn't care about coasters anymore back then. We just went to Orlando for fun, and this was a super fun coaster. Between those elements and being able to pick your own song, we were just lapping this thing and having the best time. In 2017, I put this on my first ever top 50 list. People came at me saying this was a horrible ride, asking what was I thinking, and it made me wonder, maybe I overrated this as a GP. I got back in 2021, rode the back row, and if you watch this channel, you already know what happened. It gave me one of the best rides of all time. There was ejector airtime, bone-crushing intensity, all the mid-course brake runs were off, and this went from outside my top 100 all the way into my top 20. I only got that one ride, and I've been saying this ever since. I bet if I rode this again, it would shatter my opinion of it. Therefore, this is now officially back on the list of the coasters I need to re-ride. I'd hate to lose that feeling of loving Rip Ride Rocket, but it's gotta be done. Hollywood Rip Ride Rocket isn't the only coaster that would still be on this list. Lightning Rod is getting a new high-speed chain lift this year, replacing the unreliable LSM launch. I gotta give it a try this summer. Top Thrill Dragster is now Top Thrill 2. Not sure if you call this a re-ride or an entirely new credit, but I'm curious and I'm gonna make it a point to try it out later this year. The Beast at Kings Island is still a coaster I've never got to ride at night. I was finally at the park after dark in 2022, but at the time it was down for retracking. I'm gonna make an effort this year to get to the park before it closes to get that night ride. There are a few others I want to add to my need to re-ride list. First, there's Trimmers at Silverwood. This ran pretty rough in 2019, even though it had a good layout, and with RMC coming in and smoothing it out, I'd like to see if it's any better now. I was severely disappointed in Jersey Devil when I rode it in 2021, but I heard they fixed some of the problems that was making it run slow, and now it's actually good. Also, maybe don't ride it when it first opens in the morning. I will definitely get on this over the summer. I got to ride Gale Force one time, at night, and it was a lot to take in. I would have loved to get a re-ride, but that was a 45-minute wait and I had to pass. It pulls some insane forces, and I think if I rode it again and knew what to expect, I would like it more. That's all for this video. Let me know what you think of any of these coasters, and what coasters you feel like you need to get a re-ride on. Before you go, don't forget to drop a like, and if you're new here and want to see more content like this, please give me a sub. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.